I wanted to welcome you to this first collaboration between SciArt Santa Fe, the Los Alamos Science Fest, and Los Alamos Arts Council. I'm Jacquelyn Connolly. I'm the Executive Director for Los Alamos MainStreet and Creative District, and we are the organizers of Science Fest, among other things. And we're very excited about this exhibition that has spurred these great conversations that we're going to have today and later on in July. But before I turn over this laser event, I would like to extend a few thank yous to our supporters that have made this possible. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, SciArt Santa Fe, David and Lisa Hampton on behalf of Los Alamos Arts Council, Los Alamos Arts Council, and all of their support, as well as the Bradbury Science Museum for letting us come and be in a brand new space that has not been open to the public before. So lucky you all. And it has fantastic air conditioning. Please enjoy it because our historic structure that we'll be going to later does not. So get nice and cool. I wanted to tell you a few words about the show so that you can be thinking of that while you're listening to these wonderful artists present their work to you. Into the Realms of Possibility is the title of the show, and it's really odd how we titled this project and it's become so accurate to what you're going to see in the exhibit. It's about 2 blocks away, so it can be a short walk, which I would recommend because parking as you get closer will be more challenging. But if you do need to go towards there, Andrea gave her some information she can share with you a little bit. But the exhibit itself gathers an array of methodologies for expressing and experimenting within the intersections of scientific and artistic practice, although I have to say I'm not sure how separate those endeavors really are. For some, you will see how 30 years of thinking and teaching have evolved into a creative realm, allowing for a very heavy and physical abstraction of key scientific concepts. For others, you'll witness the artistic practice spurring advances in scientific discoveries and deeper delving into massive scale concepts with small handmade exploration, which is just really incredible. Still others seem to wonder at the beauty before them in their exploration of mathematics, physics, ecology, and other topics within the realm of science, as well as resulting physical presentations that take the viewer along that journey of that reflection that the artist is pursuing. Still others seem to have a sense of play, and not necessarily in the sense that they take the craft haphazardly, but it's almost anything but that, but instead show a playful view that upon closer inspection, it is clear that this is serious work, this is serious business. And just as the widely lauded realm of the scientist, the world is better for these discoveries, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. With that, I'd like to hand this over to Andrea Poli, who is the Executive Director of SciArt Santa Fe. I'm so appreciative of her efforts. We wouldn't have this exhibit, obviously not this programming without her, so we're very, very grateful. She is the professor at University of New Mexico, a fantastic artist, and is also in the show. And we look forward to seeing you here in a few hours.
Thank you so much, Jacquelyn. This has been so wonderful to work with Los Alamos MainStreet and now with the Bradbury, so thank you so much. So as Jacquelyn said, I'm Andrea Poli. I'm a professor of art and computer science at UNM and a member of SciArt Santa Fe. We are an organization that supports art and science, that intersection that we call SciArt. And one way that we do that is by hosting these lasers. These lasers stands for, it's not about lasers necessarily, although it can be. LASER stands for Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. The Leonardo International Society for Art, Science, and Technology started lasers quite a while ago now in San Francisco, and they've invited organizations to apply to be official laser sponsors in their region. So we are the official kind of Santa Fe, New Mexico region laser sponsor. And we have generous support from the NEA, New Mexico Arts, and from individuals in our community, and of course our great partners, Los Alamos MainStreet, the Bradbury Museum, and the Fuller Lodge Art Center for the Into the Realms of Possibility exhibition. We have several other things happening during this month of the exhibition here in Los Alamos, and you can find out about this upcoming programming on July 14th. We have Michael Barnard and Brittany King will be presenting a performance and film screening. You can find out about all this stuff at sciartsantafe.org, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter there as well. Many of you already are donating to SciArt Santa Fe when you register for our events, and for that we're very, very grateful. If you want to do more and are inclined to the irrational, you can support us by buying us a piece of pie for as little as $3.14 a month from our Patreon. So just click on Support Art Science on sciartsantafe.org. So what I'm going to be the introducer for our three amazing presenters and our moderator. Each presenter will present for about 15 minutes, and then at the end our wonderful moderator will lead a discussion with our presenters and all of you. So I'm just so thrilled for that. So our presenters, I'll just name all the presenters and our moderator, and then I'll introduce our first presenters. So we have the three presenters, Sasha von Dorp, Colin Barker, and Mark Neyrinck, and they're all exhibiting artists in the exhibition. Our moderator is Susan Latham, whose wonderful work is being shown also in the exhibition in a tribute video, and I will introduce each person as they come. So our first presenter, Sasha von Dorp, is a self-taught multidisciplinary artist. Born in 1972, he started making art at an early age and has been exhibiting his work since 1992. His works, which are at the gallery, you have to see at the gallery, are just incredible, explore the rich territory invisibly folded into the most common elements before us. For the last 20 years, Sasha has mined a rich vein of work at the intersection of light, water, and sound, creating an original and technical and artistic vernacular all his own. Deeply influenced by the Light and Space School's artistic tradition, Sasha's work blends his deep love for the natural world and modern physics. And his work has been featured on PBS and published in the New York Times Art Section and many other distinguished publications. After living in the Philippines, Sweden, Mexico, Taiwan, and Los Angeles, he has returned to Taos, where he works and lives with his wife and 4 children. We are so fortunate for Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. When thinking about doing this, I thought it might be interesting to see kind of an evolution of my work. I've been an artist since I was a child, but really became fascinated with oil painting and nature. And so I'm going to start with, I grew up in a small adobe house in San Cristobal, New Mexico, and this was our kitchen table. So I started as a plein air painter and didn't know where, I'd pack up my paints, wouldn't know where I was going to go, but until I got there, and wouldn't know what I was going to paint until it was done. And in 1997, I moved to the Philippines and started painting in the studio. And so my work became a lot more introspective then. And I had big questions about my existence and what is life. And so I read a lot of physics books, and I also looked a lot inside of myself. And so my paintings from that time kind of reflect that. And then right around 9/11, I was back in the States, and I decided to make a flag that I thought represented what would be good for humanity, or what humanity should be. And so also I have a deep love for the tetrahedron shape. And so I built a tetrahedron shaped sculpture, and I called it a love ripple machine. And it had all sorts of implements. You could do big drawings in the sand, you could shot fire, but I wanted to find the tetrahedron shaped sound so I could put it in the sculpture and make it more of a fully embodied piece. And so I started tinkering around in my studio with just found objects, a little car speaker, battery, bowl, and then I graduated to a trash can and an amplifier, and kind of kept iterating. And so in order to see sound waves, you can see them, but in order to understand sound waves consciously, everything is happening too fast. And so I experimented with a bunch of different materials, and one that I really, really loved was marbles, because marbles kind of, they form a natural hexagonal grid, for one thing. And so in a way it's like dividing the sound equation by 6 or 7. And so there's me and my nose, and here's me and my marbles. And I also experimented with fire and all sorts of different materials, oil. The fire didn't turn out as well as I'd liked or thought, but it was pretty fun. And then I started experimenting with photography and trying to see form, basically. And at that time, I kind of came up with what I wanted to do is find a relationship between light and sound, which is really difficult to do because they're two different energies. But I ended up settling on this in a place where I would correlate the lows in the piano to the reds, middle C to green, and the highs to violet. So I had a really smart friend who wrote this code for me in about 5 minutes. She's a physicist that works for NASA, and so I used that code to kind of create my first installation. Let's see if I can. So this is kind of a montage, which is really long, and I'm not going to put you guys through the whole thing, but I want to find the marbles. So everything from soap, candy balls, whatever I could get my hands on to try and see patterns. But really, marbles, in terms of being able to understand them, were the best. Okay, just going to go through that guy. So this is a sound-induced painting that I made, and what I really wanted to do was to get sound waves to get a liquid that would freeze automatically and take the form of sound. And I couldn't find any materials for that, but I was in Taos one Christmas Day, and I had left a water bottle in my car, and it was -5 degrees outside. And I got to my car, and the water bottle was liquid. And I couldn't believe it, and as soon as I picked it up, it turned to solid. And I thought, oh, I should try and make a solid ice block, because I did a little further reading and discovered that water doesn't actually freeze at 32 degrees. If it doesn't have any adulterants in it, it can freeze at a much lower temperature. And then furthermore, if you add a positive charge to water, it will freeze even lower. So I've tried to do this so many times, and I've failed every single time. But I just thought that's kind of a neat thing. So I was living in Los Angeles, and I flew back to LA, and I had an art show with my sound machine. And I didn't want to show it in a trash can, so my intent was to come home and build a sculptural base for my machine. But I happened to look out the window and saw the nose cowling on the wing of the airplane, and realized, oh my God, this is like the perfect thing. And so this is a nose cowling off of a 747, but it's 8 feet in diameter, and I just with the logistics of building that were going to be too crazy. So I ended up settling on a nose cowling from a 727 as the base for this machine. And around that time, I moved into a new studio, which was problematic for me because it had direct sunlight coming in the window, and I wasn't used to working with sound and sunlight. But I quickly discovered that there's always a 45-degree angle of incidence inside of the sound palette. And so that sunlight is going to get refracted. And so the color spectrum opens up. And as soon as and it was really by accident that I discovered that, but as soon as I discovered that, I just fell in love with the light aspect of that equation. And so that's what I've been exploring for the last 15 years. So here's a video, if I can get it to play. It's a short video. It's the same music as the last video, but this is actually a real music video because the music is creating the visuals. So this was 2010, 2011, right when I was discovering sunlight. And so fast forward a little bit, I met my wife in Taos, fell in love, and moved back home. And this is my studio, and this is where I work. And so I have a south-facing window that allows me to work from October through April. And the reason is because I need direct sunlight, and the sun is low enough in the sky that I can work between those months. And so here's kind of an example of some of the work that I've been doing recently. And I like to think of these as documents in time and space. And so the way that I title these pieces is the frequency that created it, the timestamp up to the 100th of the 1000th of a second, and the GPS location of the studio that it was created in. And it's just this deep well that I have yet to get tired of. Here's a cloudy day, still refraction. And so, in the times that I'm not working, or in the studio, I also do installation projects, and I'm really interested in fusing the senses. So fusing the auditory, the visual, and the tactile senses into one experience. And so right now in my studio, I have a tetrahedron light box, which takes ambient sound and translates it into light, and then takes that light and retranslates it back into sound and pushes those sound waves through your body. So you get this kind of immersive experience that you're in control of, because it's your voice that's talking back to you. So it's currently set up in my studio, and it should be for another couple months. And anybody that wants to come experience that, I welcome you. So let's see.
What's your address?
Yeah, so there's just an incredible deep well of possibility, and this one's pretty cool. This is a portrait of a friend of mine who's an artist, and he played the piano, and I took his piano and I put it through my machine, and so this is that was him. Here's the tetrahedron. Just a couple stills. Here's like just an example of a installation that fused those three senses together. And this is actually showing down in the gallery, and this is 22.22 hertz, or sorry, 222.22 hertz, and it kind of shows what surface tension. So these little droplets, and you'll see, but I finally got my hands on a better camera, so shoots 2,000 frames a second. This is 7 seconds, becomes 13 minutes, so really slowing time down. And then lastly, this is a little mock-up for an exhibit that I'm having in September. It opens September 17th in Taos at the TCA. And it's we're going to also have the Paseo at the same time, which is an outdoor interactive festival, which is really fun for the community. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
So we're going to move on to the next speaker and have a discussion at the end. Welcome those of you who came in during the talk. Our next speaker is Colin Barker. Colin Barker has a wide experience that is appropriate for this SciArt show. He came to the U.S. after completing his doctorate in geochemistry at Oxford University. After research at Exxon, he was a geology professor for many years. His research included analyzing lunar rocks for NASA and working on the dry, hot rock drilling project at the lab. But he was mainly involved in petroleum exploration research as a consultant for companies around the world. When he retired from research, Colin moved to Santa Fe and has spent the last 20 years making sculpture. At first, he worked with welded mild steel, and many pieces had a geological influence. Later, he began constructing pieces from fluorescent plexiglass and is currently using this four-colored material to coat genes and DNA and other geometric forms.
Thank you. You said it all. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be part of this show. It's very interesting to see this combination of science and art. For me, they've been separate. The first half of my life I was a scientist, and the second half I became an artist, and there's been almost no overlap or melding of those two. So to go back to the beginning, I started life as a chemist, and the Oxford program was unusual in that the fourth year of the undergraduate you had to do a full year of research and write a thesis. So I did that as part of my chemistry degree. But I was interested in geology, so I did that in the geology department, and then I stayed on there to do my PhD afterwards. So I defended my PhD on Wednesday, and on Saturday the whole family sailed for America. So I didn't stick around very long. I was part of what was then called the brain drain, and I came to Austin, Texas. Now, you moved from Oxford to Austin, Texas in the mid-60s, and you know all about culture shock. So it was an interesting time. And so I worked there as a postdoc, they call it, for a couple of years. Then I worked for Exxon in their research center for a couple of years, and then became a faculty member in geochemistry. And there was almost no art involved in any of this. But eventually I reached retirement age. And the nice thing about Tulsa, where I was, is that you could drive to Santa Fe in a day. And so we knew when I retired, we were going to move to Santa Fe, and we did. So when I arrived here, I thought, maybe it's time to get back into art, which had sort of always interested me, though I hadn't done much of it. And so I went down to the community college here. And with my geologic background, I thought, I want to be a stone carver. I'm going to be the next Noguchi here. And they said, everybody has to take the foundation course first year. Okay, I can do that, no problem. And part of that was telling you all the materials, wood and steel and stone. And I got hooked on steel. And so I've really hardly ever carved a piece of stone since. With a background in geology, of course, my interest was in things that were pretty geometric, like mineral shapes. And so one of the first pieces I made was this piece, which is really like two galena crystals, which is lead sulfide, interlocking in one another. And of course, when you get into art, there are two aspects of this. One is the technique. How do you do things? How do you learn to weld? And then the second thing is, what do you do with those skills? What do you choose to make with it? And so I was very strongly geometric in my choices. Almost no biological background. Okay, I didn't want to carve nudes or do animals or figures or that. So my pieces tend to be fairly geometric. So I was sitting idly watching television one night, flipping through a magazine, and what happened was, of course, the renewal card flipped. So I sat there, I folded it, I folded the corners down, and I looked at that and thought, that's an interesting shape. So I went in and made it out of steel. And so these early pieces then, I think I've missed one here. Yeah. These early pieces were folded steel. To make them a little more interesting, I drilled some holes in them. And it's interesting in what influences you in the direction you take. Because we had a young relative, David, who was visiting 9 years old at Christmas and drawing everything. And this piece was there and he drew it. But he drew it with like two large holes and curved surface. And I looked at that and thought, that's damned interesting, I can do that. And of course, if you've got a curved surface, you tend to go all the way through and move into 3 dimensions. And so I moved into larger holes and 3-dimensional pieces. And so one of the first ones was this piece that's called Flame. And you can see it's just a hole with large steel. It's about 6 feet high. But holes don't have to be round. And they don't have to be a complete hole. You can cut it in half and move them into separate pieces. Or you can make them an oval and slide them around. And so I made a lot of pieces that played with the hole idea. And so this is one of the later ones. You can see the hole now is really sort of 2 ovals that have slid, and I've made it into 2 pieces. So these are some of the later steel pieces that I made. Now, I want to just jump back here and digress a little bit. Okay. The next time you've got your Diet Coke or gin and tonic or whatever you drink, look at the ice cubes. And if you're like me and you buy cheap ice, they're full of bubbles, right? Natural minerals are exactly the same, except the bubbles are microscopic. You're going to multiply them here like 500 times, I think. Yeah, 500 times. This is what I spent 3 years doing my dissertation on. Holes in material. And suddenly, I'm making sculpture that's got holes in materials. And I think, here's my back of my mind coming forward to influence the sculpture that I'm making. And so I was interested in these, as they're called, fluid inclusions, and I think that was an influence that I didn't recognize until years after I was actually doing it. Now, I've still got this geology background. I know how geologists recognize rocks. They cut a very thin section, so thin that it's translucent, and then they examine it in polarized light. And the polarized light gives you different colors. You can recognize the minerals. And so this is not a specific rock, it's just an idealized example of colored plexiglass. But again, there's another interesting break here, because my wife bought in a store a plexiglass tray, but it really popped on the edges. And I realized, or found out later, this is fluorescent plexiglass. So I checked that. Nobody in New Mexico sells it. I found one dealer in San Diego and one in Salt Lake City. So I get now fluorescent plexiglass from Salt Lake City. And again, my tendency is always pretty geometric. As I said, I'm not into biological forms. And so I made pieces like this. You can see how this picks up the sunlight on the edges. I drilled holes so I've got more edges in it. And that's one of several pieces. But there's one limit with fluorescent plexiglass. It only comes in 4 colors. Yellow, red, and then an orange and a blue. I was reading one of the science magazines one night, and they're talking about what's being done with DNA and all of the experiments there. And I realized DNA is coded by just 4 what are called nucleotides. I've got 4 colors, I've got 4 nucleotides. I can code DNA. So I can make things like this, in which I take the 4 colors and code a gene, or part of it. I mean, the full gene would probably be longer than a football field. So I started coding genes. And the first thing I did was this one, which is from the zebrafinch, an Australian bird. And this is the gene that's responsible for birds singing, but also for speech. And so I coded it here. Now, we're dominated by computers. Okay? Everything runs digitally. In other words, 1 and 0. Well, I've got 4 colors, I can code 2 quite easily, or I can just go to black and white. So here, I've coded an equation that gives the remnant of the Big Bang. Okay, the Big Bang is trillions of degrees centigrade, unimaginable, and it's cooled off, so now it's down to a fraction of a degree. And I found this equation that someone had digitized. And so this is the digitized version of that, and I call it the echo of the Big Bang. Yeah. And this is the cosmic microwave background, as it's called. Okay, I want to finish up with just an interesting story. About 8,000 years ago in Western Europe, there was a mutation in a gene in one person, almost certainly a woman, and that mutation led to blue eyes. It spread across Western Europe, and so that's where we see blue eyes now. You don't see blue eyes in the Far East, in Korea, or anywhere. And I thought that was interesting. So I, again, looked into this because Santa Fe has one of the depositories for the national DNA data. And the director there told me how to get into this, find out the information, and get what I needed to code it. You can see here, I'll code it if these mean anything to you in terms of the nucleotides. And so I coded the blue gene, or part of it, 150 nucleotides, and this is what I got. And this is one of my pieces in the show. So I finally arrived at the end of what I have to say. So thank you for listening.
Mark Neyrinck is our final speaker. Has a background in astronomy and cosmology research, going to the University of Colorado Boulder for his doctorate and continuing to do research into the cosmic web of matter and galaxies. He became particularly interested in art integrated with science, working at Johns Hopkins, after finding a physically meaningful connection between how the cosmic web forms and origami. His art interests and practices have continued to broaden. Scientifically, too, he is most excited about exploring connections between different scientific fields, especially involving branching or fractal structures such as river networks, neurons, circulatory systems, and trees.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really awesome. Yeah, I guess I'll talk about kind of as art as a transdisciplinary catalyst. But first, I'm going to talk about what got me into SciArt. I always had some artistic-ish interests, but actually mainly music and writing. But my parents had some artistic interests, but I wasn't really into visual arts until I got into this through the science. And so first I should tell you something about how the cosmic web forms. So this is, you can maybe see some stuff materializing. This is I'll start it again. This is different from what a scientist would show, which tries to pack as much information as possible into the shortest amount of time. But this is a more artistic representation of how now it's starting. Okay, so this shows some structure kind of forming, and this is from a computer simulation of that kind of simulates how this cosmic web that I'm going to talk about forms. This is the beginning of the movie is sort of the Big Bang, represents the Big Bang, the start of the universe, and there are tiny fluctuations in this that start to grow. And at some point there was a cosmic microwave background epic. we just heard about that. But as gravity pulls on this, it makes these folds occur. These look kind of like light caustics also, except they're dark. There's a thing called the dark matter sheet that's folding in this computer simulation, and in the corners you can see some even more interesting things happen. Those are sort of galaxies that have formed, and this ribbon between here is what's called a filament. That's one of the components of the cosmic web. And I should say that this person, Amelia Scarlin, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but Scarlin encouraged me to have this proceed more slowly so that you can actually get a feeling of what's going on rather than just seeing, whoop, and here are some structures formed. Okay, so being a little bit more scientific, whether that's good or bad, what kind of governs this process is gravity, and we think there was some random arrangement of high and low densities, with very small differences between these densities, little tiny fluctuations in how much matter is from place to place, and that the picture here shows a representation of that. The greenish lighter patches have a little bit less matter, and the bluish darker patches have a little bit more. And what happens is that something I haven't mentioned also is the expansion of the universe. If you subtract off the expansion of the universe, which is always happening, so you're sort of zooming out at the same time as the structure is forming and the universe is expanding. This patch of the universe shows these patches that have a little bit less matter. Those expand faster than the average, and these patches that have collapsed and to form these blue blobs, or this cosmic web, those started off expanding slower than average, and gravity caused them to stop and actually turn around and form clumps instead of continuing to expand. And okay, that's how I got into this. Was while I was working on a way to identify these blobs. They're kind of visually apparent, but still, to do science objectively, you have to have. It's helpful to have an objective algorithm to decide where where exactly the galaxies formed. And I was thinking about how this was a folding process, and I happened to see a presentation at the Space Telescope Science Institute by origamist Dr. Robert Lang, who has been a physicist also. He's kind of one of the top origami people in the world. He was talking about the mathematics of origami, and I wondered if that might be helpful in my research too, in addition to designing, in addition to the process of designing origami. And so, well, it's possible to find origami works like this. These are called origami tessellations. Here's something by Robert Lang on the bottom. Most of these tessellations are based on patterns that say we're at the Alhambra, that's what this was based on, or just lots of tilings of space that can be made into these tessellations. And I should say that this has, at least I kind of recognized the way this looked generally as something similar to, this is another computer simulation of the cosmic web forming. In general, there's some patches that have like one layer of material, and between those there's like a pleat of this fabric, and it gets lots of layers of material in these clumps that are the galaxies, and so this reminded me of that. And this is built out of some basic units. Each of these little nodes is what's called a triangular twist fold, or it could be a polygon. It's the simplest, it's the fewest number of folds that you can have that forms like a knot or a node in this network. And so after a few years, I developed a 3D version of this origami mathematics, which actually this involves some tetrahedra. There's something that I call the tetrahedral collapse model of galaxy formation. And in this model, this whole cosmic web is built to it's idealized. It's much more angular than the actual cosmic web is. But what happens in this is that there are some galaxies that are generally linked by these filaments between the galaxies. And one thing that generally happens here is that, if the galaxies spin, that has to show up somewhere in the filaments spinning also along their axis. That was basically a prediction that filaments generally should be spinning. And we found that there were in computer simulations that there are some rotating filaments, which in retrospect wasn't a huge surprise, and but it was good to actually find that. And I guess it's a little bit self-aggrandizing, but it is an example of art interfacing and going back and forth with science, so I think it's worth mentioning. Here's a video of a filament from a computer simulation, and you can hopefully see that some of it's twisting a little bit. The actual rotation of these things is much more ponderous than is suggested here. So these are the biggest rotating things in the universe, basically, and they're moving. Like the rotation period can be like the age of the universe. So it's very, very ponderous, but it's still rotating. And this led to an observational, discovery that generally these filaments are spinning. Here's a artistic representation that I did here. It looks sort of like an umbilical cord. It's red and blue because of the redshift and blue shift of the light that they use to infer this rotation. That was kind of a success that I'm kind of proud of. So now I'm going to talk more about the art that I'm into. So one thing that I've done is, this is from a workshop. So origami is very angular, as I said, it's simplified, but in general, of course, you can have folding without the restriction of the paper not stretching. And an example is this tulle fabric that if you bunch together a bunch of patches of that, you generally get pleats between those patches. And so at least conceptually or qualitatively, this looks kind of like some of the cosmic web pictures that I showed. This also has a relation to structural engineering. So this is just going to be like a few quick slides about other artistic stuff. This is there's actually a geometric connection through, again, some of the work of Robert Lang between origami, the cosmic web, and things that look kind of like dream catchers that are called spider webs. And here's an example by Tomas Saraceno of an actual spider web that he scanned and flew up to installation size. And he made a suggestion that maybe this has something to do with the universe and the cosmic web, which he likes to reference. And it turns out that it is related. That the cosmic web is basically a structure that you can have entirely in tension, which is called a spider web. Here's another thing that another kind of branching structure, which is it's a computer. It's sort of a 3D version of a slime mold. There's actually a slime mold experiment in the gallery, which is just started. So, but maybe it's progressed a little bit so that you can see what's going on. And it's in the arrangement of this thing that the installation is about, called the local sheet. I think it's kind of underappreciated that we are in this. Well, here's the Milky Way. You are here, and I think at least some people are familiar with Andromeda, the nearest large galaxy. But there are lots of other galaxies, of course, around us, and they happen to be in this flat arrangement called the local sheet. And I think this is maybe as important or more important than constellations, but it's little known. And if you put oats in an arrangement of those galaxies and let a slime mold go, it tends to connect those together, which is cool. And just flashing through a few more branching structures, which of course trees and neurons. Leonardo da Vinci liked trees, and, well, at least he has this drawing of it, and he made some scientific inference about, or guesses about, how the width of various branches are related to each other. There's mycelium. I think it's so far this is just flashing some branching structures, but also interesting, of course, is understanding why they're branched, why they have the properties that they do, and basically this like the lungs are in this branching arrangement to maximize the nutrient transport between the outside world and the body, confined to a small space. And similarly, the cosmic web is kind of, well, this is, I'm going really fast, but I think there's kind of a relation, a similar idea going on with the cosmic web. This is speculative, but the cosmic web kind of brings matter that was originally kind of uniformly arranged and efficiently brings that into galaxies, similar to how rivers bring kind of a rainfall that's evenly distributed into seas and oceans. And just flashing pictures of river networks and watersheds and balloons. So okay, that's it for my presentation. I think that there's, well, even though there's kind of an impression that physics is solved, there's a lot more to understand in the universe, even physics. And I think it's great to relate these various systems to each other, and art is a great way to do that. I think even sort of spiritually thinking that what's going on the vastest scales in the universe is also something that's happening in your body and that you can see in rivers and similar systems is really powerful. So thank you.